Every morning, this man walked past marble floors that carried his name. Yet not a single soul inside knew who he truly was. To the people around him, he looked like just another man who didn't belong. They had no idea how wrong they were. Behind that office door sat a woman who believed appearances told the whole story. She was about to learn just how dangerous that belief was. In seconds, this quiet morning was about to turn into a moment no one in that building would ever forget. What happened next would strip away every assumption in that room, because the man they underestimated owned.
If you have ever been judged before anyone bothered to know your story, this video is for you. And if it moves you even a little, hit like and subscribe, because stories like this one deserve to be heard by more people who need the reminder that dignity is never something to be handed out based on appearances. Daniel Hayes woke before sunrise, the way he had every day for the past 6 years. The small apartment above the hardware store on Fenwick Street was quiet except for the hum of the old refrigerator and the soft creak of the floorboards under his feet. He moved carefully past his daughter's bedroom door, careful not to wake her before it was time, and started the coffee maker that had seen better decades. Emma was 8 years old, all gap-toothed smiles and stubborn curls, and she was the reason Daniel got up every single morning no matter how tired his bones felt. To anyone who saw him on the street, Daniel Hayes looked like an ordinary working man. He wore faded hoodies and worn jeans, drove a pickup truck with over 200,000 miles on it, and spent his weekdays doing odd jobs around the neighborhood, fixing fences, hauling furniture, helping elderly neighbors with their groceries. He never talked about his past. He never mentioned the name on the deed to half the buildings downtown, or the shares that sat quietly accumulating in a trust that bore his late father's name. Nobody knew because Daniel had made sure of it. After his wife passed 3 years earlier, he had pulled back from the world of boardrooms and financial statements that once defined his family's legacy, choosing instead to raise his daughter far from the noise, far from people who might treat her differently because of what her father was worth on paper that morning. Daniel had one task on his list: opening a small college savings account for Emma at the local branch of Sterling National Bank downtown. It was symbolic more than anything. A promise to himself and to her, a physical reminder that no matter how ordinary their life looked from the outside, her future was something he intended to protect fiercely. He folded the paperwork into a worn manila folder, kissed Emma's forehead as she left for school with her aunt, and drove his old truck into the city. The bank's downtown headquarters rose 30 stories above the street, all glass and steel, sunlight bouncing off its surface like a mirror, daring anyone beneath it to look away. Daniel had not set foot inside that particular building in over a year. He preferred smaller branches, quieter ones, places where nobody recognized the weight behind his signature. But Emma's school required documentation from this specific branch for a scholarship program, so here he was, walking through the revolving doors in his hoodie and boots, folder tucked under his arm. The lobby was a cathedral of marble and ambition. Polished floors reflected chandeliers overhead, and men and women in tailored suits moved through the space with the practiced confidence of people who belonged. Daniel felt the usual weight of eyes sliding over him and away, the quick, dismissive glance that working-class clothing seemed to invite in spaces like this. He was used to it. He had built a life around being invisible, and most days, that suited him just fine. He approached the customer service counter, where a young teller offered a polite but hurried smile and directed him toward the new accounts desk near the back of the lobby. As Daniel walked, he noticed a woman watching him from behind the glass wall of a corner office. The nameplate on the door read, "Victoria Sloan, Branch Manager." She had the sharp, composed look of someone who had spent years climbing a ladder and intended to protect every rung of it. Her eyes tracked Daniel's worn boots, his faded hoodie, the crease in the manila folder under his arm, and something in her expression tightened. Daniel sat down at the new accounts desk across from a nervous junior associate named Priya, who greeted him warmly and began pulling up the paperwork for Emma's account. He explained what he needed: a modest custodial savings account, some initial documentation for the scholarship program, nothing complicated. Priya nodded along, typing quickly, clearly eager to help. But before she could finish entering his information, Victoria Sloan appeared at the desk, heels clicking sharply against the marble floor. "Priya, I'll take this one," Victoria said. her tone polite on the surface but edged with something colder underneath. Priya hesitated, clearly confused, but stepped aside as instructed. Victoria settled into the chair across from Daniel, folding her hands on the desk, studying him the way someone might study a stain on an otherwise clean carpet. "Sir, before we proceed, I want to make sure you understand the requirements for opening any account at this branch," Victoria said, her voice carrying just enough for nearby customers to hear. "We require proof of steady income, valid identification, and a minimum opening deposit. This isn't the kind of institution where we can simply accommodate anyone who walks in." Daniel felt the familiar heat of humiliation creeping up his neck, though he kept his expression steady. He had faced worse than condescension in his life. "I understand," he said evenly. "I have everything you need right here." He slid the manila folder across the desk. Victoria opened it with 2 fingers, as though it might be contaminated, flipping through the documents with visible skepticism. "These pay stubs are modest," she said, loud enough that a well-dressed couple waiting nearby turned to look. "And I don't see a permanent employer listed. We do have community programs for people in your situation. Perhaps a smaller institution down the street might be a better fit for your needs." The words landed like a slap, not because they were cruel in themselves, but because of the audience Victoria had deliberately gathered with her volume. Daniel glanced around and saw a few onlookers exchanging quiet smirks, a security guard shifting his stance to watch more closely, Priya standing frozen with embarrassment on Daniel's behalf. He thought of Emma, of the promise he had made to give her a life where she never had to feel small the way he felt in that moment. "I'd like to open the account my daughter needs for her scholarship application," Daniel said quietly, holding his ground. "I have the funds. I have the documentation. I'm asking you to do your job." Victoria's lips curled into something between a smile and a sneer. "Sir, I think you may be confused about what kind of bank this is. We serve a certain clientele here. There's no need to make a scene." It was Daniel who had said nothing raised or dramatic, and yet it was Victoria's voice that had risen, drawing the attention of nearly a dozen people in the lobby now, phones subtly lifting to record the spectacle of a branch manager publicly dismantling a man's dignity over a savings account. Daniel felt something shift inside him, not anger exactly, but a quiet, resolute clarity. He had spent years trying to live an ordinary life for his daughter's sake, hiding the truth of who he was to protect her from a world that treated wealth as a substitute for character. But there was a difference between choosing invisibility and accepting cruelty, and Victoria Sloan had just crossed that line in front of an audience. He reached into his jacket pocket, unhurried, and withdrew a slim black card, its surface embossed with a small silver crest, the same crest etched into the marble above the building's entrance. The same crest that appeared on the letterhead of every official document belonging to Sterling National Holdings. He set it gently on the desk between them. Victoria glanced down, confusion flickering across her face before recognition dawned, slow and horrifying. The card was not a standard bank card. It was an executive access credential, the kind issued only to board members and majority shareholders of the parent company that owned Sterling National Bank outright. "That card belongs to—" Victoria's voice faltered, her earlier confidence draining visibly from her face. "Daniel Hayes," he said simply. "Majority shareholder of Sterling National Holdings. My father built this institution from 3 branches in 1987. When he passed, I inherited controlling interest, though I've kept my involvement quiet for personal reasons. I don't usually announce it. I've never needed to, until today." A hush fell over the lobby. The couple who had been smirking moments earlier now stared, wide-eyed. Priya's hand flew to her mouth. The security guard straightened as if suddenly aware he was being watched by someone far more important than he'd realized. Victoria's face had gone pale, the sharp confidence that had defined her only moments earlier evaporating into visible panic. "Mr. Hayes, I had no idea. I apologize if there was any misunderstanding." "There was no misunderstanding," Daniel said, his voice calm but firm, carrying easily across the silent lobby. "You looked at a man in a hoodie and decided he didn't deserve basic respect. You said it loud enough for a room full of strangers to hear, so that everyone could watch you humiliate someone you assumed had no power to answer back." "That wasn't a misunderstanding, Ms. Sloan. That was a choice." Victoria opened her mouth to respond, but no words came. Around them, phones that had been recording out of curiosity now captured something entirely different. Not a spectacle of a struggling man being turned away, but the quiet unraveling of a woman who had built her authority on snap judgments and cruelty toward anyone she deemed beneath her. Daniel stood, buttoning his hoodie with the same unhurried calm he'd carried since walking through the doors that morning. "I'll be speaking with the regional executive team about what happened here today," he said. "Not because I need this branch to open my daughter's account. I could open 20 accounts with a phone call, but because there are other people who walk through these doors every day without a black card in their pocket. People who don't have a name on the deed to fall back on. They deserve to be treated with basic dignity too. And today you showed this branch exactly how far that standard has fallen." He turned to Priya, whose eyes were still wide with shock. "You did nothing wrong," he told her gently. "You treated me like a person from the moment I sat down. That matters more than you know." Priya nodded, blinking back unexpected tears of relief and gratitude. Daniel walked out of the bank the same way he had walked in, unhurried, unremarkable in appearance, save for the fact that every eye in the lobby now followed him with a mixture of awe and disbelief. He did not need to raise his voice or make a scene, because the truth itself had done all the necessary work. The story might have ended there, a private moment of vindication witnessed only by strangers in a marble lobby, except that one of the customers who had filmed the exchange posted it online that same afternoon. By evening, the video had been viewed hundreds of thousands of times. The caption simple and devastating: "Bank manager humiliates a man for looking poor. Turns out he owns the bank." Comment sections filled with outrage on Daniel's behalf, admiration for his composure, and quiet reflection from people admitting they too had judged others by their clothing rather than their character. 2 days later, Daniel received a call from the CEO of Sterling National Holdings, an old family friend who had known Daniel's father for decades. Victoria Sloan had been placed on administrative leave pending a full review, and the bank's executive board had announced a company-wide training initiative on dignity and respect in customer service, directly citing the incident as the catalyst. Daniel did not ask for Victoria to be fired. When the board reached out for his input, he requested only that she be given the chance to genuinely understand the harm her assumptions had caused, rather than simply being made an example of and discarded. He believed, perhaps because of everything he had endured after his wife's passing, that people could change when given honest reflection instead of pure punishment. Whether Victoria took that opportunity to grow was, ultimately, up to her. For Daniel, the encounter changed something quieter and more personal. He had spent years hiding behind ordinary clothes and modest routines, believing that invisibility was the safest way to shield Emma from a world that too often confused wealth with worth. But watching the way Priya's kindness had shone through the ugliness of that morning, and the way strangers online had rallied not around his money but around the simple idea that everyone deserves basic respect, Daniel realized that his silence had never truly protected anyone. It had only allowed people like Victoria to operate unchecked, confident that no one who looked like Daniel would ever have the power to hold them accountable. That weekend, Daniel sat on the porch steps with Emma, who had heard whispers about the video from her classmates and finally worked up the courage to ask her father about it. He told her the truth, plainly and without embellishment, about her grandfather building something from nothing, about the choice Daniel had made to live simply so she could grow up grounded rather than entitled, about the woman at the bank who had judged him without knowing anything about who he was or what he carried in his heart. Emma listened with the wide, serious eyes only children seem able to summon for the truths that matter most. "Is that why you always help Mrs. Delgado carry her groceries, even though you could probably pay someone else to do it?" Emma asked. Daniel smiled, pulling her close against his side as the evening light softened over Fenwick Street. "That's exactly why," he said, "because who you are isn't about what you have, sweetheart. It's about what you do when nobody's watching and how you treat people who can't do anything for you in return. That's the only inheritance that really matters." In the weeks that followed, Daniel didn't change his hoodies for suits, didn't trade his old pickup truck for something sleeker, didn't announce his wealth to the neighbors on Fenwick Street. He remained, by every outward appearance, an ordinary single father raising his daughter with quiet devotion. But something had shifted beneath the surface, a recognition that dignity should never be conditional. that judging a book by its cover said far more about the judge than the judged, and that sometimes the most powerful thing a person can do is simply refuse to let cruelty go unanswered, even when silence would have been so much easier. Emma's college fund grew steadily in the account Priya eventually helped him open at a different branch, a small act of continuity that felt, to Daniel, like proof that decency always finds its way back around, given enough time and enough people willing to choose it.